This session was supposed to be the definitional one, but it's also the open debate one, or open discussion one, and the concluding session where you need to say something else, and we also need to discuss what's next to some extent. So we'll try to somehow combine all of these issues, and in the sense that I will raise some general questions, but I think that we'll be happy to hear from most of the people around here, all of the people around here at some point, but I'm saying not necessarily immediately go around the table, because it seems to me
Same time.
we solved all of the problems by saying cascading multiple complex discussion. But for us, it seems to me that in the last 2 days, and to a large extent also in the February meeting, we focused to a large extent on the descriptive side of the potential differences or the definitions of cascading. And in, at least to me, it seems that we've lost something, or at least potentially lost something extremely valuable, which is, why does it matter? Right? And I think that it's even more important if our starting point is, as was emphasized several times during the last 2 days, that we are inventing these definitions. Right? So if we have the liberty to define these terms, I think that it's significantly relevant to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of defining those terms? What is the purpose of the project? What is interesting normatively, and how it relates to the definitions that we proposed? Or in other words, what is unique about, so I think that this session should focus to a large extent on the question of what is unique normatively, theoretically, and so on, in the notion of cascades or complexity or multiple issues. And maybe this is how we'll reach a working definition, or decide that we don't need to have a agreed working definition, but it will allow us to know what we want to do in the projects. And in this sense, I want to go back to the case study. So there are 2 ways to think about these case studies. One way that was, I think, was the way that we dealt with them until now, was to help us find a definition for cascading, right? So what do we see there? But another way to look at these case studies is to say, we focus on these case studies because they're really interesting. They raise significant questions that weren't dealt through the regular ways that we think about emergencies, and our new approach reveals something important about the normative questions or other fields for us lawyers and other people around the room. And so I want to start by maybe suggesting the way that I see this project, or at least some part of this project, and then go around the table maybe to see if you have either concrete suggestions for working definition or some broader thoughts about where we're going with it. So the way that I was thinking about it is that we have these significant events or phenomena that we see. Many of them we study under the notion of emergency, right? So we have an economic crisis, we have wars, we have COVID, we have other factors, and we often study them separately. And it's extremely interesting to see the combined impact of these events, how they influence each other, how they affect the rule of law, So rather than asking whether the existence of these two events should be called cascading or multiple, we ask ourselves how, in what way, and the combination of these two events change the way that we think normatively about the issue. So I'll give you just one example that is not multiple.
Read the rule of law.
So I'll give an example that actually deviates at least from the first paragraph where we describe the project. There are two paragraphs in the website that describe the project. I want to go to the second one, because the second one doesn't address multiple emergencies, but it addresses technology and maybe democratic backsliding and so on. So for example, I look at, in my research, I look at technology and the law that governs, that regulates armed conflict, and I ask to what extent certain types of technologies changes the way that we think about the regulation of warfare, right? So the interaction maybe changes something fundamental about it. And I think that here again, we can ask to what extent the combination, for example, of the war and the distinct civil unrest or democratic backsliding, taken together, right, create some challenges, normative challenges that we want to address. And I think that here there's many ways that we can explore it, and it leaves a sufficient room for various, I think, normative perspectives and discrete and theoretical approaches that I think can combine the different interests of the people around this table.
You want me to share the paragraph?
Sure. Right. So again, the way that I think about it, rather than I think that like one potential interesting project is what we've done in relation to focusing on these definitions, but I think that simultaneously we can think about this notion or how to frame distinct significant events that are usually dealt when focusing on them separately, and what's the relationship between these events creates. Okay, so I think that now we can open it for discussion, and again, it could focus either on a potential working definition for what we're dealing with, or broader thoughts about the direction of the project. I will just say that to me, it seems that this type of approach, maybe, and clearly we need to refine it, also addresses what the concern that Yahli raised again and again in the last 2 days, saying like, what about democratic backsliding, right? So is it an emergency? But again, it's a major phenomenon that is usually studied on its own, and its relationship to existing emergencies is something that to a large extent is new, and without having to determine to what extent this is an independent emergency situation. Okay.
All right. I come back to my point at the beginning of this discussion. Take it from my field of medical law. Classification of phenomena, classification of disease, or classification of psychological phenomena. How you classify this by symptoms, identify certain symptoms. Then some of them are grouped together. Then you put a title on this symptom. For example, there are symptoms of post-trauma. So you say if someone has this and this and this and this, then he is post-traumatic. So the symptoms define phenomenon. I'm saying that what are the advantages of if you have agreed on that you can recognize its symptoms, then we have a common language which is very important. When we talk about post-trauma, or we talk about a certain disease, all those who are dealing with this phenomenon will use the same terms. They can communicate. They can. The last point is that we define the phenomenon by its symptoms. Everybody knows that they're talking about the same thing. Then you can go to the next level, which is very thorough research or study on something which is agreed upon.
So this is, I think, a great point, and it goes back but to the theory group, right? Because I think that we've debated so much about the question whether it's an impact or a cause, and in many ways it's a matter of scale, and we can still debate it, right? But I think that maybe it's not that important, right? It's important. What is important is whether whether the relationship between this impact / emergency / cause and the initial one is understudied. There are significant gaps in discussing the relationship or the importance of this issue. And again, it also goes back right to some of the questions of the definitions, right? Whether a single silo can create some transformative impact on society. Can we really differentiate between the two? I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure that it's critical. And to some extent, this goes to the complex thing that was added, maybe to solve the problems that I'm not sure that we can solve by focusing only on multiple and cascading.
I also think that complex has to be there no matter what, whether it's inside or not.
So I feel that this whole entire time, like the rule of law has been floating, but I mean, clearly when you try to think about these phenomena from different scholarly perspective, you're going to ask different questions and emphasize different aspects of whatever pathologies you're trying to identify. The question for me is always, how do we bring it back to what the center is good at? Because your people can deal with the preparedness, for example, which is great. I mean, I guess within that scholarship. When I look at it as a lawyer, I have two different possible questions. Is how do you regulate this field under policies, which is a question that Nadiv very much wanted to highlight. But when I ask about the rule of law, it does become a question of magnitude. And a question of magnitude that asks, is a special response needed that isn't available under the regular? And when I say like the regular constitutional order, when I say transformative, I mean, society can be transformed. The question is, do we want our emergency powers transforming the constitutional order during the emergency? I mean, obviously, some tools might stick, but who decides on that?
It's similarly about institutional structures.
Yeah, so that's is our group interested in really limiting the scope of this research to those questions, or are we still going, even in October, from what I understand something is going to happen, discuss the same
in Denmark?
thing, or should we just retract back to more defined scope?
We'll continue a step further.
It's an open discussion. It's not like that.
I think it would be good to have
to go
around. Yes.
So you can start.
Well, for me, one of the things that I've been talking about yesterday and today is about those three definitions, and my issue is the definition of multiple, because cascading events are part of multiple events, and cascading is a subgroup of multiple, and the use of multiple should be replaced with something like parallel or something else, which means that they are not cascading events, but they are happening at the same time. Compound. The terminology needs to be identified, but the idea is that
Compound is too close to complex. It's confusing.
But then we
How
have
it's
triple
used.
C, and it's a good acronym.
and the idea is
That's a good catch.
that multiple should not disappear, but that's the
meta.
mother group, supergroup
Of
all this
non-single cell.
project. Even the single one.
That have cascading impact, but not.
Could have, if you look at the impacts, could be under multiple issues.
What you
And
get.
therefore, even that one event could be within that
So
discussion
what
of
is
multiple.
what is not multiple?
Nothing.
Okay, so all the world is multiple.
All the world is multiple. Yeah,
Fine. So that's a catch-all category. So
in a way it is, but you can have outside of it. But the idea is to remove multiple from the classification.
I think I'm thinking about what can come out from this project, and one of the things that I think is important is to have the big picture. But after we have the big picture, for each one of the participants to find his place in the picture. So somebody can say, "This is my point. This is my." This is where I find myself, and see how. But in order for everybody to have his own corner in this picture, we have to have the picture. And so, what I hope to come up with the results of this workshop is to see the picture. and I don't know exactly how to present it, the picture. Practically, we will have, and I think about the simple way to share the results of this workshop. So this was something that is, I have to think about it. We have Jay here that is, we'll have the transcript or the notes of the workshop, and I want to ask you to think about how we can use it to go to the next step. I don't know the answer to, but thought.
I'm a liberal.
let me write it down. I have to.
And as a liberal person, I don't think we have to put a very strict framework for our project. I think that everyone, people who combine together and write what's most interesting to them, which is vaguely connected, roughly connected to cascading conditions. So, for example, some thoughts or ideas that came to me during these 2 days, who are interested in democratic backsliding or the rule of law, can write a paper on rule of law as an extreme condition that affects other extreme conditions, or extreme conditions, natural disasters, or other extreme conditions that affect rule of law, democratic backsliding. There is an idea. And many other ideas came up. And I think that, we should organize this and see who is interested in researching and writing law. Magda is interested in international law, more international relations or pressure in international law. So the end result will be a collection of papers, which are not, as I said in the beginning, are not necessarily a full picture of the field, but I think they will have a great contribution on the idea of cascading and multiple and complex and compound extreme conditions. I would have listed various topics and see how they relate to each other and continue from there.
But since you're liberal, it won't be a closed list. So I want to take the end to say maybe two things. A, that we should all read these two paragraphs again and to see that actually we have two separate themes here, or potential themes. The first paragraph deals with multiple emergencies, while the second one, no. So the group will explore the intersections of democracy, the rule of law, both domestic and international, and technology under extreme conditions, which again, it's a different version that doesn't focus necessarily on the interaction of two distinct emergencies as we understand it. So this is one thing, and I think that you can all find, from what I've listened, some people didn't feel extremely enthusiastic about this, some of the issues mentioned here, and I think that this can allow everyone to fit, but also I think that we have here two different projects of this group. One, which we do need to think about more clearly about definitions and the way forward is this potential, huge grant application or whatever. And the other one is research products of this group for the coming. And I think that this is what you're referring to. And here, I think we can be extremely liberal. And for us, I think that the way forward, before moving on to Deborah, in line with what Ellie said, is to, in a way, stop being obsessed about finding this common ground and insist on finding specific projects for the people around the table in order to be productive research outputs.
One word about the big picture. What I learned with Deborah, that the framing is very important. I mean, you can see the same picture, and everybody sees something else. So when we talk about the big picture, we let everybody have his own frame.
Yeah, if you read the second paragraph, really includes.
It concludes. You didn't read the end of the sentence, though. Read the whole sentence. It says this group will explore the intersection, democracy, the rule of law, domestic and international, and technology under extreme conditions, which may include.
Armed conflicts, political instability, natural disasters, and complex emergency combining.
Right. So it is within that framework.
So forget everything.
No,
but I do agree, right? So we, Deborah.
You can say just a little because I feel like I've talked too much during this workshop. I do.
No,
I do. I think I've been too. I do.
You project.
I'm being liberal.
No, no.
No. You were fun. I think first of all, compound is good, but which I like, and I understand Ido's typology, which is fine. Compound disasters, and underneath some of them are cascading and some of them aren't. Some of them are just, taking place at the same time. I think we can look at both compound, it's hard for me to, but compound or cascading impacts and cascading disasters. I think that we could look at both sets of, so that when I listened to most of the case studies, I actually heard them as, except for maybe COVID, which I could frame differently, but as single disaster events that had a lot of, that had cascading impacts. Okay. So, and then what I would focus on in the case studies are the interaction of those cascading impacts. Maybe that could be more of a focus. Some people at the same time would look at, like, the example of the Weimar Republic, look at cascading disasters and their impacts. So, that's kind of where my thoughts are, but I want to hear you guys, and then
I'll be brief as well. I want to follow up on Ellie. I think people here are asking different questions. And I'll be stating the obvious by saying that different questions, different projects, different conclusions, different disciplinary boundaries, different everything. And I want to give two examples from that are my conclusions from the case studies, excellent case studies that we heard yesterday, just to make what clear. I hope it will make sense to you. Most of the case studies through a long timeline, and I think all of them were focusing on cause and effect. Tried to sort of pin certain historical events, and A led to B. And if this is the domain, then maybe a categorization of different crises and emergencies makes sense. Cause disasters and natural disasters, pandemics, we have a measurable defining moment you can look at. When we're talking about man-made crises, it's much more complicated. We've seen it in the case studies. So maybe people that are going for historical case studies or contemporary case studies should look at this categorization, and this would be an anchor for looking at the broader theoretical questions that were raised here. If we're looking at democratic backsliding, for example, or the rule of law, that it's not the same, but both issues have surfaced here. And that again derives from the question. I will just give an example that I wrote here. I think, Daniel, it was when you were talking. I swear on it. It was many hours ago, but I think it is. So working hypothesis A, for people that are interested in it, can show that in certain cases, crises and disasters are being exploited, utilized, politicized by governments to weaken democracies. Okay. Working hypothesis B can say the exact opposite, that we have governments or leaders that are targeting their democracy and trying to weaken them. And that causes crisis. Okay? That's completely the opposite. My point is that different case studies, I think in this case, will not necessarily lead to the same conclusions. We'll have case studies that will show my A example, and other case studies will show the exact opposite, and both examples will still be the domain of multiple cascading, and that's fine. I think these are the boundaries of case studies, and we need to acknowledge that, and it's fine.
I think I'm going to pick up right here and also relate to Yahli, because the more I listen to you guys, the more I think that we don't necessarily, let me rephrase it, I don't think that limiting this project to finding definitions is productive or is as productive as you would like to be. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it at all. So what I've been thinking is that, and it's been done in many different interdisciplinary projects. You can have a section or a group of people working on frameworks or theoretical approaches and other taking the, I don't know, branches or case studies or perspectives. But then making sure that we look through whatever interests us, whatever interests us through the lenses of the extreme conditions, right? So it's a really kind of new conceptual framework, but it's different than all of us trying to come up with a definition, because then we'll have a lost situation when 10 years, these autonomous weapon systems, when 10 years later, people still have the same conversation and it just doesn't go forward and anywhere. And at some point we mentioned a collected volume, and it could work quite nicely. We just have to make sure that there is a list of potential topics and we all factor in the right lenses. But it doesn't mean that we all have to have the same definition of whatever we call the preconditions, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not sure. So there will be people working on definitions.
I think there is a group of people who's really interested in it. So
and there will be people who will work on case studies.
I wouldn't call it case studies, but maybe branches or approaches or whatever.
Okay. Definitions are important to differentiate between case studies.
You got me there.
Or symptoms like
symptoms or okay. Why did we have a definition for symptoms? Okay.
That's the next workshop.
But then you said that the people who will work on X branches will not necessarily may develop their own definitions because they won't necessarily follow the definitions.
That's not what I said. I said they don't have to have exactly the same, written in black and white definition of cascading, multiple, and complex.
So what will they have?
The common lenses of the extreme circumstances. I'll talk more about it on Wednesday, but that's what I'm trying to do with my project when I'm looking at the large population movements related to armed conflict. And armed conflict in itself being usually a classic example of an extreme condition. And then the large population movement caused by it being what? So that from my, little field, it is a fairly unique way of looking at the problem that interests me. So I'm pretty sure that for most of us at the table, not most of us, those of us not focused on the theoretical aspect, people are doing similar things, just call it differently. So they use the idea of cascading emergencies as a different angle of looking at the underlying issue. In my case, this is the large population movement, but we have many different.
Maybe
it all goes back
a
to
large population
everything.
movement
Case studies, that's
can
at
be
the end of the
a
day, that's the common
fantastic
denominator.
topic. For example,
That's the same.
when you talk about large population movement as a result of natural, as opposed to result of man-made.
There's a reason why I'm not calling it deportation or displacement.
No, but this is a new angle. I'm thinking about the fire that we had a few days ago. Everybody forgot about it by now, right? Because we relate to it as a natural disaster. Had Bibi's declaration of arson would have been very fine. Would have been totally different. COVID the same. If from the beginning we would have related COVID as a terrorist attack of the Chinese government.
Chinese attack.
Okay. So it's an interesting angle.
The social meaning of what's happening is very important.
I'm just inventing.
No, it's totally, we have it.
we didn't think about it until now in this sense.
No, we said that it's important to differentiate because the social meaning of if you die because of a virus, or if you die because of or a car accident, or if you die because of a terror, the whole social meaning of it dramatically different. I totally agree.
And it also affects the cascading element,
It affects the law.
complex element.
Affects the legal law.
Affects the money.
If
If I go back to what Magda and Deborah I think that we can all agree that these like armed conflicts, political instability, natural disasters present the usual cases when we think about extreme conditions or emergency, and that this group deals with the interaction between at least two of them together. It can be, and in contrast to what some say, we can think about maybe even two armed conflicts or two natural disasters as also falling under this definition. And some of the group can focus on like a general theoretical framework, and other people who are interested in specific questions that relate to the interaction between two or more emergencies, such as those.
Maybe we should write down the questions, because I can think of at least 5 or 6 really big questions around that. But maybe that could be the...
Everyone can write.
Let's continue.
Yes.
I have thoughts about it. And, I think that the first thing is that sometimes we talk too much about the definition of cascading, multiple, and complex. And we, as Ellie said, we forget to talk about the democratic backsliding or rule of law. Well, I mean, maybe it's only me as a legal scholar, but I think also the center itself has its focus on the rule of law. So I think each project should be related to the interaction between the compound emergency and the rule of law. But then there are all kinds of interactions. Just a minute. There's all kinds of interactions, and as Maya said, sometimes the democratic backsliding can be a cause to other emergencies, and sometimes the outcome of an emergency can be it affects the rule of law or democratic norms. And I think in my COVID case, I tried to show kind of both. There were like both kinds of interactions, also affected the rule of law, but also the abuse of the rule of law created some new emergencies. And when I think about the whole project, and you know how all kinds of academic books with which have collections of articles. There's always a first article as introduction, which tries to group everyone together, and maybe this should be done afterwards or in the meantime, or maybe the theory group had different, but so as each project develops, there should be, let's say, one overarching short introduction paper, which tries to group the different phenomena that we discuss in each paper. And that will allow us maybe to go around this definition issue. Because let's say I talk about the COVID, and then eventually there will be one introduction paper which tries to group everything together.
Provided they're groupable.
Yes, but I mean that's why we are a research group. So we try to develop it together, and we talk to each other. So we do manage. I do think it's manageable.
Well, I pass.
Well, the fashion designer comes to the room, into this room. Look how we are dressed, right? Because This is his profession, that's what interests him. So what I'm trying to say is that in our field, there's a notion which is called bounded rationality. And bounded rationality means that if somebody is an economist, he will see the major variables that will interest him, and he will see them. The point of explanation is economic variables. If you are Marxist, you will see the world in certain lenses. You will not see other lenses. Okay, so what I'm saying is, when I'm trying, because these are different languages, different observations. So I'm trying to to bring a methodological remark. But if you come from an empirical, you start with reality, and from the reality, you go to the mission. Give an example. 3 psychological phenomena: burnout, fatigue, and exhaustion. These are neighboring concepts. So how can I know if somebody burnt out or whether he is exhausted? How can I differentiate between these phenomena? What you do if you want to study it? Use common sense. Go back to common sense. We put all kinds of questions that we think that are related to this phenomena, even though we do not define it at this point in time. Then we build a questionnaire, and then we take all the results. Many people. There is a methodology. If you're familiar with statistics, it's called factor analysis. What is factor analysis? You take all the results, and there is a procedure. Check what questions are highly related, and if some question is not related to a certain factor, you eliminate it, or you give it to another factor. You get factors that define these distinctions. Then you use common sense, and then you put a title on that, based on the result, based on the empirical study. What I'm saying is that since the titles were given a priori, stating multiple, complex, now we're trying to, as we have the titles, we're trying to understand what is a cascading phenomenon. At this point in time, I don't understand what is a cascading, what are the cascading implications. What I'm trying to say is maybe we should forget the titles, okay? Let's try to go and analyze many case studies of crises, many crises. See what way they differ from each other. Then to put the title on. Okay.
Micha, we want you to write a paper.
What?
I want you to write a famous paper already. Cascading emergencies as a function of different types of leadership.
Actually, there's a paper on that.
There is
No way.
Fadi sent us.
So I sent it to them yesterday.
No, leadership styles are relevant. But we want you in.
But does it have the word cascading in the title?
Okay.
If you listen to my yesterday, the bottom leadership is overrated.
It's the followers, not the leader.
That's our cascading disaster.
I think that I relate very much to what Micha said about having to paint the bigger picture first, for a few reasons. The first being that, there's a whole field of research from which we're supposed to depart that's already done work on extreme conditions. And if we don't have the big picture of what we're looking for, how are we supposed to know that we're even innovating or doing anything different? It is possible that people wrote about multiple extreme conditions, they just didn't frame it that way. So I think that is important. Also, the second point being that as someone who worked on the historical test cases, I have felt that we don't have kind of a unified definition or definitions then I'm looking for case studies according to like intuitive definitions of what sounds right to me about these terms. And I kind of have a preconception, and that's what I see. It inhibits my ability to find maybe a different, more interesting case study that would fit better into the frame that we will end up hopefully developing. So I'm not sure when I do that, because I have the preconception, I'm not sure I'm doing important work in regards to developing the definitions, and maybe that should precede having the definition to finding the case studies, or just be kind of intertwined. But I'm not sure that finding the definition through the case studies is the most efficient or even best way.
What is your preconception?
Let's say I'm thinking of cascading, and I'm thinking about, okay, so there is causality, but I need something more than that, probably. And also I think cascading maybe is the, well, I'm going to say that it's the easiest to understand intuitively, but I'm not sure that's true. My point being that I think we should have like at least tentative definitions, maybe something similar to what Amnon did today, but something that we can all work, and then we can develop those based on the work that we do. But I mean, my feeling is that we need to have common ground in order to achieve something that is holistic, and also, and it feels to me that it will just be easier, and like it will be the better way to do it.
And you don't think that we already achieved sufficient common ground for?
I think we can extract a common ground from what we did here in the last 2 days. But I think we should have, like, let's say, like guidelines, okay, to know what we're looking for, yeah.
But somehow, seriously, the 2 workshops, we couldn't agree on a working definition.
That's what I'm saying, that we need to extract it.
Maybe we should have votes. Have a vote.
So I'm going back to what I said at the beginning, that if you have suggestion or a working definition, please share it when it goes there. So maybe we still have a chance, and it's not by chance that Amnon is the last one, because he will give us the working. And
maybe we don't need a definition report.
Daniela, one camera is there.
But I'm talking about tentative definitions that can and should change. We'll be working and making progress, and I mean developing them. But like, again, just a common ground to start from.
Maybe we can have the symptoms before we have the name of the disease. I mean, we don't have to come with a definite definition, but we should know what we're talking about. It's like it's not a definition.
We're starting to
define what the definition is.
We're starting to remove what is not. We already talked about complex, which is outside of the scope. We're trying to remove things that are outside of the scope, which will help us sharpen our way into a definition. Not necessarily the definition, but a definition.
I don't think complex is outside the scope.
Well, it was for 5 minutes.
I thought it was everything. Multiple is right.
No, I thought that complex was too complicated to deal with.
Complex?
No.
Sorry.
We need 2 more days.
Okay, I don't know. I agree with Shani, but I also agree. I think in one place.
You can walk in the unit.
Okay, but for me, well, besides the idea of look a lot of case studies, because automatically I was trying to do this with everything, because I need to tell to people in Brazil what I'm doing here. So I'm trying to explain the idea and the categories. So I was just like a child and looked to a favela and I saw, oh, this could be an extreme condition. What is this? So I'm trying to analyze everything that I know in
inside of these categories. And for me, it was very interesting to do a lot of case studies and think about it and to construct the idea of the categories. But in the other way, it helps me a lot, the unknown table that he sends by email and the presentation. It was very nice to have something, some guides. Yes, it's nice. So I think that we could go in both ways. I'm sorry, I do not offer any solution, but for me, I don't know. We could go the both ways together, but I think that we should talk to each other. The group that works with the case studies should talk with the group, the theoretical. At the same time. It's a mess, but I don't know. Good work.
Yeah. No, this has been really great because I think I have a much better sense now of the definitions, even if we don't agree fully on them yet, of the definitions of the terms that we're using than I did even before yesterday. So I think I'm on your overviews yesterday and today have been very helpful for me. I think coming into this, I also thought, cascading, multiple, complex, I kind of, all of those terms blurred together in my mind. And so I just thought, okay, cause and effect, it's simple. But so now I think what different types of cases can be. So one thing that I want to speak with Magda about this more at some point, but one thing I want to think about more, and I would actually be curious to hear more about from all of you, is under the complex rubric, the transnational and international. I feel like most of what we've discussed yesterday and today has been sort of in these national silos. I don't, unless I missed something, I don't think really these aspects have come up very much.
It was a purposeful decision by Ido to leave the transnational and international to the next.
I see. Okay. Yeah, no, but I think that, that's my background. I'm a historian, but really historian of international relations. And so this is where I think that I'm naturally the most interested in gravitating towards that. But so that's something I would like to be part of learning more about as we move forward. I don't really have much else to say. This has been a really good learning experience for me.
But maybe you can share your better understanding of the distinct terms. So.
Yeah, sure. I think that, so just the cascading versus the multiple, or now we're calling the compound. I think that understanding, the direct relationship between the cascading as opposed to the parallel crises, right? Or even, I think, the difference between vulnerabilities and how do I put it? The vulnerabilities and then the stresses that turn into an emergency, right? I think that I was thinking of vulnerabilities themselves as crises, as sort of long-term crises. So in the case of Lebanon, the weak economy, distrust in government, corruption. These are endemic, right? And so I think this is going to be helpful for me to think about, okay, these things exist in the background, but what specifically is the trigger? So I need to think about this some more.
By the way, transnational and international, not only. Oh,
yes.
And actually, the interesting, mind. In extreme conditions that emerge in many countries at the same time, like COVID, it might be a very different phenomena from emergency or extreme conditions in one locality from many perspectives. For example, limitation and borrowing and displacement of population is the same. So it's not limited to international law. It's really the flooding Czechia that impacted many countries. It might be a very different phenomenon from a same magnitude of disaster that impacts only one locality. So just no. Agree with the lecture, Dr. Boker.
Let's go 2,000 flowers.
A few said that before me. Time to move and do something practical. Hopefully fun and hopefully like important academically. And I would just start by either trying to work on the special issues, maybe of Israeli studies, web connection, or some other venue or a book. And see what happens. But I wouldn't wait to try everything after. I felt that it's the right moment already after the February workshop. Now I feel that it's even more ready. I think that we should have some overarching idea for this thing. Two ideas that I have is either connected to the current moment somehow, right? Talk about crisis in Israel and Palestine or Middle East. Want to include paper about Qatar, Kuwait, sorry. Or maybe to discuss about different places. Or maybe take the work that we center have done for the last 12 years. If there is like a statement that we're moving from one thing to another, how we reflect, choose some of the case studies, maybe ask some of the people who have been involved to reflect, or use the huge amount of work that we have to develop that. These are just two ideas. I think that the most important thing is that we have to move very quickly to do something practical.
Great. So I agree with you all. I feel that I exhausted my ability to deal with the methodological and definitional elements, and that work was fruitful enough for me to understand that my standard perception towards emergency would be revised. So for that reason, I fully agree with the people who think that we should start writing stuff about that in the liberal approach that says that each and every one of us could write what he feels right. Most particularly, I have two leads that I'm thinking of. One of them is to write a short piece, a conceptual piece about emergency as policy, to destabilize the definition of emergency, which could further on help to people that want to think about constitutional designs of emergency. And the other work that I'm thinking of is write a paper about polycentric constitutional emergency, and to argue basically that the classical Schmittian dictatorship tradition has imagined an event that today is not fully exist, and to worry how this will affect constitutional design. I'm not sure that I have all the line drawn, but I think that this will be something that I will probably start doing in the summer. We also, I report the group that we already submitted, suggested to a special volume to a law journal in England that try to incorporate a couple of our ideas in the theory group and to suggest a special volume. Most probably it won't get accepted. We can still send it to you to see what we did. If it will get accepted, we have, Fadi has Public Law, which is English, quite good journal. Fantastic journal. Yeah, so this is why it won't get accepted. But if there are analytical structure, maybe, but yeah, they have, well, it's not a journal, they have a special section of updates, and we formulated a group together with Margit Cohen, Anu will be the editor, and for Fadi, Nadav, and Margit proposed papers. And so for example, Fadi, you might talk about it if you want, but if not, Fadi want to see if there's interesting relationship between power sharing and complex emergency. Nadav want to deal with the question of continuity, because it's a classical question in theory of emergency, and to see how complex emergency affect those questions. And Margit will deal with question of sub-constitutional legislation and what can we learn from the corona about that. I think that the proposal could be, we called it revising emergency powers, or something in an English terminology, but if you want to look about it.
With English spelling.
And if it will get accepted, so all of the jurists among us that want to jump in, we will be able to incorporate one or two at least. משפטי לצערי. לא דיסציפלינה. אני רציתי את זה. אתה יודע ככה.
I think I gave my opinions in the beginning, so reading this has kind of opened my mind a little bit, because I was very fixated on the multiple cascading and their connection to rule of law. I mean, this seems more liberal, which is fine. And I agree, we should just move forward and each of us take these ideas and try to implement them within their own frameworks, and see what comes out of them.
So, I don't think I have much to add.
By the way, the concept of the rule of law itself is not something that merits. There is no one unified definition of what is the rule of law.
Yes, Eddie, but we have to take into account that liberalism is great, but the more different conception of rule of law in emergencies and these
extreme cascading conditions, this question of the change of rule of law.
Yeah, sure.
Shiran.
Yes, hi. So I think that we haven't discussed enough about one of the components that Maya talked about yesterday, and this is the time span of the research, especially the historical test cases. And I agree with Maya that a historian needs to limit his research to a specific time span. It is needed. However, having said that, I think one cannot ignore the large picture. For example, in my case of Yugoslavia, one cannot really and truly understand the civil conflict without investigating the past, without examining the very roots of the ethnic divisions, which actually led to the political polarization. So I think this component should be, perhaps for now, flexible. And if you can elaborate a little bit more about the time span you think should be in the center of the historical desk as research, I'd be very, very happy to hear about it.
Didn't hear you.
Daniel?
Hi, sorry. Okay, so I'll pick up where Shiran left off. Sorry that he's not so happy about my opinions right now. I think the truth is in from what I've heard in the last 2 days, I guess this might not be the most popular ever, but my gut says that time is really the most important variable here. And I'm less inclined to assign so much importance to the causality that we're talking about as the difference between multiple and cascading. I think that just deciding that we're looking at multiple events that occur within a short time period is actually more significant. And I like that because it's something observable. It's something that you can make consistent across cases. I guess in the social sciences that I am more familiar with now, like in today's day, causality is used with very cautiously, and it's an issue of methodology as opposed to not just observation. So I guess maybe different disciplines use this differently, because I've been a little bit surprised at the looseness of what we're calling causality, of what we're identifying as causality, or cause and effect. The thing that concerns me most is the empirical aspects, which we haven't discussed a lot. Maybe everyone's just going to take care of that on their own, but I tend to think that everything rests on the quality of the data and the quality of, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, the quality of what our empirical research scheme is going to look like. And that needs to be robust enough that we can draw some interesting conclusions. Yeah, but I would agree that we need to get going with something and take the next step forward.
Yeah.
So I should like to agree with most of you, my friends and colleagues, by conveying a few heretical thoughts, very humbly, and please accept my apologies in advance because I didn't have the privilege to hear the sessions yesterday. I think that if we insist on generate authoritative definition, we may have a breakthrough, but we may well hit a deadlock. And so, for example, I'm concerned that the silos metaphor misalign with current theory, and I'm not sure that we can all commit to that. Like, for example, that the remnants of the liberal democratic world commemorates today the VE Day. So the Second World War in England definitely wasn't siloed, right? It affected economy, health, science, the political system, and so on. So
Exactly the point.
So I didn't hear you well, Amnon, but so it can be a very important contribution, saying that there never have been like traditional or emergency as traditionally understood, but this may also misalign with theory. I don't want to elaborate now, but so I'm like I strongly support the idea to to come up with a collection of articles with different contributions. But yeah, like my qualification, so I also think that it's imperative to have a consolidated conceptual framework. We can't. Sorry?
I agree.
Okay, so it may be an overarching article or editorial, which somehow have to be written or composed like in parallel. So those who write the separate contributions, the independent contributions, have to use the same language. Okay, so maybe we can delineate a range of definitional possibilities, not necessarily a authoritative definitions that everyone's obliged to follow.
So this is actually a great note to conclude this roundtable, because the way that I see it and what I
wait, maybe people have other comments before
because we don't have time. It's 4:45 and at 5 the shuttle must go. So maybe just one last thing, and then we'll open for because I want to address it and say that I totally agree that even with the liberal hat that we're wearing right now, we still need to have some kind of framework that we agree. I understood that to some extent the obstacle was the focus on cascading multiple complex thing, but we do have an overarching framework, and this is the interplay between multiple extreme conditions.
An extreme condition is defined, and multiple is the idea of multiple.
No, multiple in the sense of more than one extreme conditions. Not in the sense that we address it here. So the conceptual framework could, for example, like I'm going to suggest, say, look, we take this idea of multiple extreme conditions and we break it into cascading.
Three definitional elements.
Three definitions. It has some conceptual effects, but what is mutual to all of the papers in this collection or in this project is that they deal with more than one cases of extreme condition, that each one on its own can stand alone as an extreme condition.
And extreme condition again. Extreme condition is the most. Condition is
well, we've managed to work with the notion of extreme conditions for 12 years. So what was in...
But we distinguish...
What I mean is that what was considered, phenomena that was considered part of the core interest of the center for the last 12 years could be regarded as this type of extreme conditions, right? Because we didn't deal with like small things in the sense of and some part of the group, some can guess that Amnon will be part of this venture, will have what Nadav just said as an overarching conceptual framework under which
what are we talking about?
And what it means, that at least in my vision, the October workshop will be based on individual projects that will be presented as draft papers that are part of this.
So we're talking about both, even at cascading at this moment, but cascading disasters and cascading impacts.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the case studies are indeed single.
As long as we use the correct words, I think this is the most important. So we use extreme conditions only for extreme conditions.
Right.
We use cascading impact when it's cascading impact. We use cascading disaster when it's cascading disaster. We use compound.
Itself is a new terminology.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
So I suggest that we have a memo of sorts with those definitions circulated, And if some people have any comments, they can bring them. And they can just be the launching pad for any kind of terminological.
And it's also something that could be fixed at a later stage. If there will be some differences, we can make sure that after the papers we can say some kind of unification of terminology at a later stage.
Amnon, you start with this?
I don't want to be the person who.
It will be a work in progress.
You will have to wait for my input. I don't, whatever was said here, I think was relatively clear as a suggestion to organize your own cases or whatever it is that you want to write. Just use. It is suggested to use when you want to say something about cascading impact. Use the word cascading impact. When you want to say something about parallel or compound, use the word parallel compound. If you want to talk about the vulnerabilities, don't say it's an emergency if it's a vulnerability, because then we get confused. If you're exactly as Daniel said, if your problem is a vulnerability, say, or you can use the general word crisis, which is an ongoing stress. So the vulnerability or events generate stress, and then you can say there's an ongoing crisis, which is generic. Otherwise, if what I'm saying is that we use words that have different meaning, we are trapped in a language game that sort of is
Getting on the train to Tel Aviv.
Yes.
Your bus is here, by the way.
Yalla.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
מתי שתרצו.